No, we're not doing the Manhunter riff
Damn it.
because I'd fuck it up.
Okay. Can I
I'm
just
gonna
say I came to get the old scent back?
smell yourself.
Have you ever seen blood on the moonlight well?
Hello. Welcome back to another Waffle Press retrospective. It's been a long time, it feels like. Matt and I recorded one over the break. It was a disaster, so we're here with a new series to make up for it,
It's been buried in a salt mine.
where it belongs.
It'll never be released.
I'm your host, Diego Crespo.
And I'm Matt Gringo, the other guy who sometimes is here.
And Matt, you brought up a very good topic while we wait for to get back to our other retrospectives like Alien and Predator. It might be a while for Alien.
Hopefully, never again for Alien.
Shut your whore mouth.
They're not going to bring Ridley back.
I just want them to burn down Fox Studios for $100 million.
They got it. They're going to put mouse ears on the xenomorph. That's the big problem here.
Remember when everyone was saying that about Star Wars? They're like, oh, they're gonna nerf Star Wars, and then
They're still saying it.
Rogue One ends with everyone dying.
Yeah, but Disney, they're making these safe movies, man. They just. That's why everyone has loved them.
Yeah, that's why everyone unanimously loved The Last Jedi.
That's why they brought the whole world together. They made safe movies, wouldn't upset anyone.
You want to know what else was a safe franchise? The Hannibal Lecter series, which is kind of an unofficial franchise. I mean, it is, but it isn't. It's a mixed bag.
Dino De Laurentiis seemed to think it was a franchise.
He thought a lot of things about a lot of people.
Flash Gordon's going to beat Star Wars.
But Matt, you brought up the Hannibal Lecter series, and we're both huge fans of a couple of entries in this series and the TV series that came out a couple years ago. And you thought we should talk about it, and I fully agree because, whoo boy, do we start off on a high horse here.
Oh yeah, no. Basically, the retrospective is just so we can talk about this movie. I'm looking forward to the rest of it, but I was watching Manhunter again. I'm like, fuck, this is such a good movie, and like, who can I talk to about this? And I thought of my good friend Diego, and then we decided to do this.
Thank you, thank you. I've written about this movie a couple times, just like even on Twitter, audiences everywhere, RIP. My own blog, just like a bunch of different times, and about different things about the movie, and I still have so much more to say that I never even like thought I would. It's one of those movies you can keep going back to, and you always find something new to appreciate, or like you can look at the framing and like the atmosphere, and remember when Michael Mann shot movies on film.
Yeah, it's so great. It's just beautiful and terrifying. And it's like it does that weird thing where like something that looks that good can be that intense, and it fucks with your brain in that way. And I find myself revisiting it a lot. And if you knew me back in the day, by back in the day I think I mean 3 years ago, I was harassing basically everyone to watch Manhunter. Because fuck, why wouldn't you? And then some people watching like, I didn't like it. You're a fucking idiot, Ethan.
Well, I mean, I can kind of get why people wouldn't be into it, because movies aren't really made like this often.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least, like, compared to something like Silence of the Lambs, which is another fantastic movie.
Yeah.
But, it's made in a more, like, I guess, traditional filmmaking sort of way. Not that that's a bad thing. Obviously, every movie should go about telling its own story. However, best fit.
I wouldn't say Silence of the Lambs was super like wasn't like more traditional, but it definitely over the years more people copied Silence of the Lambs than Manhunter, so we have a lot more to compare it to. Silence of the
Maybe
Lambs.
traditional is maybe the wrong words. Like, well, here, what were you gonna say?
Well, just thinking like what was the first movie to do the like talking to a guy in a cell that is like similar to you? Because like that became popular after Silence of the Lambs. Like every movie started doing it,
Mm-hmm.
and like Austin Powers like parodied it like 4 years before The Dark Knight did it,
And then
and then
after
everyone
Dark
started
Knight,
yeah, and then everyone like copied The Dark Knight, and but I think it comes back to Silence of the Lambs, which comes back to Manhunter. Like just that stuff slowly coming to the mainstream. But Manhunter is such a different because it's pre Silence of the Lambs, because every quote unquote psychological thriller that followed Silence of the Lambs kind of aped its style, and no one really aped Manhunter in the psychological thriller / horror scene. At least that's how I view it.
I would totally agree. And I think before we go into the movie as a whole, you recommended we talk about a little bit about the Harris novels and Michael Mann. But I want to touch on Michael Mann more specifically because Miami Vice, a TV show he was producing, everyone knows about Miami Vice. Even if you just heard it like in passing, you know about Miami Vice if you don't know directly what it is. It's a heavy stylized cop drama from the 80s that often it would like forsake a lot of heavy plot details for like style and mood, and like it's kind of the iconic 80s program, I would say. Would you agree?
Depends on who you are in the 80s.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of stuff that reflects the 80s that reflects more of the awfulness of the 80s, in my opinion. But hey,
it's where everyone gets those cool Vice type fonts from. Like
yeah,
Vice City,
definitely.
Grand Theft Auto is just their version of Miami Vice. You know?
Yeah, Miami Vice and Scarface,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
thrown together, and yeah, it's basically that.
Yeah, and so Michael Mann's like his style and mood and atmosphere, he basically brought that over when he did Thief, his directorial debut, or I guess featured directorial debut, because he had done a TV movie at the time, and this was kind of like the Miami Vice version of a crime thriller on the big screen, I guess. But there's more to it than that. But I guess that's like the most you can compare
Well,
it to.
Yeah, it's reminds me a lot of like certain noir films, and like more like the downbeat ones, like something like The Friends of Eddie Coyle or something like that. But it's got such a distinct visual style that it's separate. And honestly, I don't even think we started seeing that many, like Drive, when that came out. I kind of was like, oh, this is like Thief, except a getaway driver.
Yeah.
And I mean, you got stuff like Walter Hill. Walter Hill did a lot of the similar like neon lighting type thing, but Mann did it. I guess a lot more, one could say.
He still does it.
Oh yeah, and it doesn't totally fit these times anymore, I guess, considering how people responded to Black Hat.
Well, that's a whole can of worms I could get into, and
yeah,
because I get a lot of criticisms of Black Hat, but that one's very much peak digital Mann, because he doesn't shoot on film anymore.
But I'm also saying like people don't like they it doesn't fit today. But Manhunter didn't really fit when it came out because it wasn't like a big hit.
No, it lost money. I think
it might have barely broken even, but it was one of those cult movies, and that's how I discovered it. I mean, it was just one of those like ones where it was like, oh no, Manhunter's where it's at, like where you hear people talking about it, or like it was a trivia question movie, like what was the first movie with Hannibal Lecter in, and idiots say Silence of the Lambs, and you're like, no, motherfucker, Manhunter. You're like, oh, all right. Where they spell Hannibal Lecter's name with a K for no reason.
Oh yeah, was it like a rights thing? I mean, I can't imagine why they just decided to change Lector to that, and it's only in one scene.
I really have no idea. because it doesn't, because that wouldn't hold up in court.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like they tried, like there was like that weird rights issue with like Casino Royale, so like when they did like a comedy parody, they were all named like Jimmy Bond and stuff like that. So I don't know, it's just so odd. But this is, the first Lecter film, and Michael Mann's style fit, like it's such a weird combination for Michael Mann's style and serial killer hunting drama, which this is, I think, one of the first of that type. Might be the first, like, hunting a serial killer type movie.
I think you're right.
Other than, like, slasher films, or, like, Italian giallo or whatever those are called. Because the Italian slashers always had, like, a mystery element where, like, police will come in and be like, oh, there's a killer. But it was never, like, getting deep. It was more a whodunit than trying to discuss, like, the psychology of a killer. I think Manhunter's the first one to do that.
And not only that, I think it's also the first one to really like get into the psyche of that detective. I mean, obviously a lot of noir and like mystery cop films deal with like the toll a mystery takes on the detective and like the relationships and whatnots. But you've never seen that really married with the serial killer aspects by this point. And this one covers like all new ground in both categories.
And I think that's because like stuff like criminal profiling and serial killer were very new. Like those terms were very new when Manhunter was released. I think I got to check, because like, isn't Manhunter based on the guys who came up with the term serial killer?
I still need to watch it. I think so.
And it's basically where they came up with like the criminal profiling ideas, which a lot of criminologists will say is actually pseudoscience. There's a lot of debate about the validity of criminal profiling, but it was new, and Thomas Harris was very interested in that kind of stuff, so he wrote a book about it, and came up with two of the greatest characters of all time, and only one of them makes a second appearance, which is so odd to me, because you get like Hannibal Lecter. Because it's basically like if you did Sherlock Holmes, but instead of, you only have one story with Holmes and the rest are Moriarty.
Yeah.
With the Will Graham Hannibal Lecter combination.
It's bizarre. Maybe he couldn't mine anything out of the Will Graham character.
That might have been it, but I think it's just like there's all this talk. Thomas Harris is one of those writers who like hates writing.
Oh.
And he's like made such a fortune off of his like the Silence of the Lambs property that he really doesn't even need to write. And he keeps like a very low like profile. Doesn't give too many interviews. So I think it was probably a difficult task to write, and then he just didn't want to do it again.
Yeah. And then we'll go back to him when we get to Hannibal and Hannibal Rising, because there's a lot of talk about with him there, and I feel bad for him is all I'll say.
I feel bad for everyone.
For everyone involved with all those movies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But for Manhunter, yeah, with that style, like normally this would feel like a kind of exploitation-y. Mm-hmm. And I think what separates it is because Michael Mann, with all of his crime drama stuff, like his movies sometimes have relatively high body counts. Especially everyone knows the Shootout in Heat, which is remarkable filmmaking, but not like glamorized at all. Like, it lingers on the people that get shot just long enough, so you kind of feel kind of bad for them. And then you see the aftermath of, like, the second half of that movie is the aftermath of this insane shootout in the downtown streets of L.A. And Manhunter is really kind of like the early roots of that, for me, anyways. At least I see that, where Mann is interested in the psychology of the killer, but also because the killer, the Tooth Fairy, or Francis Dollarhide, the Red Dragon, whatever names tossed onto him, he's ultimately basically a broken human being, and no one is there to help him, and you don't sympathize, but you feel bad for him. You know? Like, he wants to be more than what he's become in his own
Graham even says it in the film, where like he empathizes with the child that was made into this killer, but he doesn't empathize with the killer, you know?
Yeah.
But you have to understand like at some point in his life he was just a kid. Mm-hmm. And that's a newer thing. especially when you're dealing with someone who's like basically pure evil. I mean, he does things that you can't like come back from. The book goes into great detail of like what Dollarhide's childhood was like and like the abuse he suffered from his family, and it's some pretty sick stuff. But the movie doesn't go into it, and it doesn't really need to because you really see it all in the filmmaking and the performances. So you don't really need like a flashback or like someone to go into tons of detail about what's driving Dollarhide.
And Will Graham, played by the great William Peterson, who would basically go on to play that same character in a abundance of cop shows. I don't even remember what series that was, but he played...
Wasn't it CSI?
Yeah, I think that's the one. And he played a similar type character, hunting down serial killers for like 10 years or 11 years for a while. And
yeah.
You see the wrong influence, I think, from Manhunter and Silence of the Lambs in series like that, or like especially something like Criminal Minds.
Yeah, Criminal Minds is like the worst end of this.
Yeah,
like that's such a bad show, and so ludicrous. Unlike Manhunter, which is totally realistic. But no, like it takes it to this level that's like that's where it gets exploitative, where it's like all mental illness will lead to serial killing.
Yeah, and it's gross and uncomfortable to watch.
It's basically like if you have like any sort of mental issue and you were slapped once as a child, you'll grow up to be a mass murderer.
Yeah,
and that's a terrible way to present those type of things.
Yeah, that show is gross. And, I mean, even outside of that, it's just poorly made, where Manhunter is perfect.
William Peterson, it's so... because he's great in this and To Live and Die in L.A., which I think came out like the next year. But he never really did that much. Like, he doesn't have like a huge career, which is odd to me.
Yeah, because he's so good in this.
He's great, and he's great in To Live and Die in L.A. And maybe he's just like an asshole to work with. I've never really heard anything about him. Or maybe just doesn't, like, maybe he's like, I do whatever's interesting to me. And apparently one of those things was the movie The Beast about a giant squid, which I've brought up here before.
Is that the Jaws remake?
Yo, it's written by Peter Benchley. I believe that he's in that. I think he's the guy. He's basically Will Graham hunting a giant squid. He's got to understand the psychology of the squid.
You've seen these swimmers, haven't you, my man?
Yes. It's so, but no, he's so great, and I don't know what the fuck. And he's my favorite Will Graham, which I know will upset some of the Hannibal TV series fans, which is not a put down on that at all. It's just I just like his like clearly barely containing his anger and excitement whenever dealing with the psychology of the Tooth Fairy. Like he's always got to like be gripping a wall or something to make sure he doesn't totally like go over the edge. Or just like the excitement he gets when he puts something together. Like his epiphanies are like not just, he's like living the killing as he does it, and it's only on his face. Whereas like Hannibal, they always kind of like they usually reenact the murder in some way. Which I like too. That adds a whole, if you're going to do it again, might as well do it differently. And again, it's so odd that he's like this great character and you only get this one movie out of him.
If this had made money and Dino De Laurentiis was like, sequel now, do you think he would have forced William Peterson to come back?
I don't know. Because the thing they immediately went to, because they went to Silence of the Lambs next, but I don't know if that was Dino.
No, I think Dino De Laurentiis went bankrupt, because I remember Lance Henriksen brings that up in an interview about Near Dark. That's why that movie failed at the box office. They had no funding for marketing. So then maybe no, maybe this, it was too late by this point anyways for a sequel. Even if it
I know there's a right. I know Laurentiis, his company owns like at least part of the rights, and because there was an issue with because they kept trying to get Clarice Starling in the Hannibal TV show, but they didn't have the rights to that character.
That's right, yeah.
So I think there was an issue there.
And then they got the rights, and this show got canceled.
Yep, which is such a shame. He wanted Ellen Page to play Clarice, and I thought that would have been really interesting.
Oh, that would have been so fucking good.
Honestly, it's a good thing this movie tanked, because we end up getting blessed with two great movies.
Yeah.
So
weird little miracles like that. But now I know we're going to talk about a couple other characters because a couple of them repeat throughout the many reboots in this series. But I really want to talk about the moments when Will Graham has his epiphanies, or when he's like studying stuff. Like the first instance you see him studying in the first crime scene he goes to is, I think, the first time we see Michael Mann start playing with like the use of like shattered glass and like mirrors and like these empty backgrounds to like really just trap Graham in like this weird state of mind, and you're like right there in there with him. And then he'll go over to like the sink and like rinse his mouth with water, splash some water on his face, but you don't see his face because it's distorted by the glass and the mirrors. And it's so good. Or when back in the hotel when he's going over the videos of the now deceased family, and every time he goes back to the TV, the framing of the shot gets more compressed, and then by the last minute of that section, it's just Will Graham in this corner with the camera mostly obscured by the TV in front of him, and it looks like he's being pushed out of the frame. And it's so good.
Yeah,
it's so fucking good. Who the fuck thinks of that? You know?
Well, and who thinks to tell? Because this is all told visually. Like, we're not even told really. Like, unless you like read what the movie's about before going in. If you go in clean, all you know is that some sort of crimes happen. There's a detective involved.
Yeah.
And for some reason, he doesn't want to go back. So we have to be told all of this visually. And Mann does such a great job of setting up like the basic thesis statement of the film just with the visuals in the first like 5 minutes of just, him at the beach, which is where we meet Will Graham, and not wanting to go back. And we get like vague conversations about this killer, and that for whatever reason, and just through the body language of the actors, you get the whole dynamic going on, and like why Graham is reluctant to go back. We don't totally know Graham's way of thinking yet, but we get that this is not a great thing to be involved with.
Yeah. And
I love the thing I love about when he goes to the first crime scene is, one, you got the mirroring POV shot, which is, we had the POV shot in the opening, which is Dollarhide's point of view going into the house and waking up, were the Leeds the second family?
I think so, yeah.
I think it was Mrs. Leeds, when she wakes up in the middle of the night and with the light in her face, which is one of the scariest images in film. Like, that's one of like my all-time nightmares. And like home invasion. And we get a mirror of that POV shot when Graham goes into the house and goes up those stairs. It's like basically this exact same shot. And that's, the first indication of, the relationship of Graham and the killer, without anyone really sitting down and going, oh, that Graham, he thinks just like him. Like a weaker film would do.
Or like literally any fucking network procedural. Oh, you got to get into the mind of the killer. Like, they don't stop promoting shows like that. And they can't convey shit. I mean, I get it, TV schedules and whatnots, but like, oh my god, I don't know how anybody could sit down and watch any of those after Manhunter. Like, it's just so boring. And this is like, every moment, every frame is just feeding you new information, or like extending some level of like atmosphere and mise-en-scène shit. It takes me to like another plane of existence when I watch this movie.
Yeah, it's so good. And I mean, then like that scene goes on too, and you go to the bedroom where the brutal murders have taken place, and so far like the whole house is dark, but it's like a blue dark. And blue is kind of the symbol, like you'll notice, like that's how his wife is framed in almost every scene. She's in some sort of blue filter. And that kind of symbolizes, his like home life's the stability and like the more naturalistic feeling. And then he literally goes up to the bedroom and shuts the blue light out. Like, he closes the blue light behind him as he goes into the bedroom. So he's like shutting off this other side of his life. So he can, the empathy, the more like human side, and then turns on the light, which reveals his greenish suit, and green is a big important color in this film. We'll get into that later. And the not quite white room that is covered in blood. And that's like just the slow building of like these colors that like will dominate different frames that will indicate like the inner workings of these characters.
I guess you could say we've seen this film, my man.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Also, want to give a shout out to Dante Spinotti, who is one of Michael Mann's go-to directors of photography, and
Yes.
incredible work here. Maybe career best. That guy is incredible. He's doing the Ant-Man sequel next. But moving on.
Yeah, if you look at his filmography, it seems to be about he's very talented, but he needs to be in the hands of good directors.
I didn't want to say anything else. But yes.
So, well, we will be talking about him again.
Oh, yes, we will. Which
as
will
we
make
will
your
see.
Statement even more credible, I guess we'll say.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's kind of gonna be a fascinating revisit.
Yeah.
But no, so like just the way that we're taught about Graham, like of course there is dialogue that we'll get more into. Graham will basically flat out say what his relationship with the killer is, and Lecter will be there to help map it out too. But it's not how they start it. You know, it's not like there's an opening scene of people like looking through a profile, and then like some movies do these days. I see you've recruited Victor Von Doom. Just it throws you in. You sink or swim.
Mm-hmm. Someone else that kind of throws in that might throw people off with how this character is used, given just how big of a household name this character is now. Hannibal Lecter. Like, I showed this movie to a friend a couple years back, and they were like, "Yeah, I liked it, but there wasn't a lot of Hannibal Lecter, And it's just like, I can understand that immediate sentiment because Hannibal Lecter he's a brand name now. And so to see a movie like this where he has maybe 15 minutes of screen time max.
I would not even. I mean, I think it's under 10 minutes of screen time.
It's less than Silence of the Lambs, but Silence of the Lambs spaces it out more. And then everything else after that has him in hours on hours of footage.
Yes.
Yeah. So I can get that, but you got to remember it's not Hannibal Lecter centric. He's a part of this overall story, and very different from other interpretations, I would say.
Yeah, and that's the thing that throws people off a lot now. Because, I mean, the two other Hannibal Lecters we have are somewhat benevolent. Not benevolent. Benevolent's the wrong word. But they have, more of a relationship with both Clarice and Will Graham on the TV series. And this Hannibal Lecter fucking hates Will Graham.
Yeah.
He just fucking hates him. Hates the fact that this fucking little dweeb caught him. A guy with clearly so many issues was able to catch him. And it drives him insane. And a lot of people, that throws people off. Because, especially those coming from the TV series.
Yeah, because they're basically lovers.
Yeah. I mean, they're best buds.
Yeah.
In that. And there is something about Lecter where, even in this, where he's like basically a huge asshole the whole movie, even in this, he still kind of gives off that vibe that psychopaths really do give off, which is that you want them to like you on some level. Like, if you met Hannibal Lecter at a party and you didn't know he was a cannibal killer, you would want him to like you. Because he's got that charisma. And that's part of what makes him such an interesting and terrifying character. And in this version, Brian Cox's interpretation of it, we see both sides of it, because we get the great scene with, him and Will Graham, the first meeting, where he's basically toying with Will Graham, and we don't realize that until the end of the scene.
Oh, that scene, I just want to talk about that really quick, because it looks like right there might be some common ground, or like some sense of commonality between the two, where they have a mutual understanding, like, okay, if this is your first time watching Manhunter, I was really easy into it, like, oh, okay, they're going to kind of work together, and I'm sure he'll toy with him. And then Lecter's like, all right, you mind leaving your files here? Would you like to leave your home phone number? And then there, it's like, oh, shit, that's right. This is a very bad person.
It's great. And I just like the idea, like, also there's, a visual component to that scene as well, where, they've put Lecter in an all-white room, a sterile room, which I couldn't even tell for the first few times watching it, but there's glass in between those bars that separate them. Very different than how Silence of the Lambs will do it, where it's just an all glass wall, very little, like breaking it up.
Yeah.
This one, there's just very clear bars, which kind of gives you that off-kilter look at Lecter. And also kind of gives you the visual of who's really the one in a cage here. Yeah. But also you have the all-white, which Mann has said that he used it to kind of give a contrast. He wanted Lecter's personality to contrast with the sterile environment. Like, the only thing telling you that he's a killer in that scene really is the fact that he's being kept in that cell. Because he really just acts like just kind of an ass. But then how he's treated really informs on just how dangerous he is. And also in that scene you got more with colors, because Graham is wearing a blue shirt this time. He's wearing a blue shirt, black jacket, and a green tie. And the green you can honestly look at as the green colors in this movie have a lot of different meanings. But it's the scent in this scene that he's talking about getting the scent back. And Lecter isn't even giving it off, really. He doesn't have any colors. He's all white. And Graham is trying to, shield himself with the blue and black, but he's the one really carrying the scent. That's why Lecter kind of says, smell yourself in that moment. It's kind of just a way of reinforcing that little thing. I just find it so interesting watching that scene.
No, it's just an outstanding scene. And then we'll kind of get to it later, but there's this fucking amazing thing that happens when he does the phone call. Now we're in the cell with Lecter, and he's no longer behind bars in any of the shots. Because by that point, he's gained control for the first time in a long time. And
even that small cell they keep him in can't contain him.
Yep. Oh, it's so good.
And again, and like I said, that's where you get that moment where you see the two sides of Lecter, because he's very charming when he's on the phone, trying to get the information he wants. And there's that creepy disconnect with his facial expressions and how he's talking, which you see again in a recent film, Get Out, has a very similar scene.
Oh yeah.
Where it's like, just slip that finger down right onto the letter G, but he's clearly like filled with contempt at the idiots he has to deal with on the phone, and it's so good. And again, like I said, it throws people off that like Lecter talks to Graham for 2 seconds and then almost immediately trying to kill him.
It's a very different interpretation, and I'm all for it. Not just because it came first, but because why would you want everything to be the same? I mean, it's interesting to look back at this and then jump forward through a remake of this very movie, and then remix of this movie and the Hannibal series on NBC.
Yeah.
It's like all these different ways to approach the same material. But last thing on that scene I want to talk about, there's a lot of really quotable dialogue, but it has like my favorite line of the series that always, for whatever reason, that one stuck with me and it scared the shit out of me. When Hannibal tells Will, he asks him if he's ever seen blood in the moonlight, because it appears quite black. And I don't know why, but that is just so disturbing to me. Just how, like, calmly and precisely he says a line that grotesque. I don't know why. That one, like, burrowed into the back of my brain when I first heard it.
No, it's great. Well, because, I mean, it's also an indication, Lecter's seen blood in the moonlight.
Yeah.
So.
Clearly, many times.
There's a whole story in that line.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what gets you. It's really... There's a lot of chilling little moments like that in this movie. And again, as I'm saying, I was doing the psychological thriller quote joke earlier, but this is a horror movie.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, straight up.
This is the natural progression of, there's Psycho, there's Halloween, and there's Manhunter. And of just serial kill. Like, our country's kind of dealing with serial killers over the years. And this is a natural extension of that, in my opinion.
It's a very interesting perspective. I'd never heard it put that way. I love it.
Well, the slasher genre goes in 2 different directions. And and you get the formula, but then you get kind of like, well, let's actually deal with these archetypes in different ways. And, you know, even this movie's attempt to not make the killers characters, like, you know, Michael Myers is like a franchise character. Well, Hannibal Lecter becomes a franchise character. So there's a lot of similarities with the slasher genre. So, hey.
Yeah. But again, this movie takes you down the rabbit hole in ways that other ones don't. And sometimes you feel like you're spiraling. And literally the following scene after this, Will Graham basically has like the most severe panic attack I've ever seen on screen.
Mm-hmm.
And he literally spirals down the building. And just, that setup is so amazing. I mean, we keep talking about it, but like the visual storytelling in this is like unparalleled.
Yeah.
And how Mann captures Graham running through these hallways, down these stairs with the music blaring in the back, and like you're out of breath as much as Will Graham is, basically.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is stuff. I don't think any film's like ever really caught up with this type of filmmaking until like recently, honestly. Like Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy kind of has some of the visual storytelling that this movie has. Which is why, if you watch this movie, I would recommend giving Manhunter at least like 2 watches, because I totally understand if it didn't gel with you the first time, but it's one of those that's it's made to be rewatched. But you know, Diego, if a film needs to be rewatched to be good, then it's a bad film.
Holy fuck! Where did you hear that?
Maybe some Star Wars fans.
Oh boy.
They maybe had a complaint about the very valid point that sometimes you need to watch a movie more than once. You know, Star Wars, you can't watch Star Wars movies more than once. Those are not movies. You're supposed to be one and done. Disposable and forgettable.
Well, if movies don't spoon feed you everything through dialogue, how are you supposed to know what they're about?
And you know, where's the story going to go now that Snoke is dead?
Why are they going to expect me to be excited for the next one if this one wrapped up its own story? That's a real quote I have from several people that I know and respect. But holy fuck.
What is there to look forward to? The emotional connection between Kylo Ren and Rey? I mean, are you serious? What type of person would want to... That's not a story. A real story is punching a tall guy. Speaking of punching a tall guy, Francis Dollarhide. You want to get into him?
Oh, yeah. Tom Noonan, a great character actor who also gives a career best performance here. Total opposite of Will Graham and Hannibal Lecter physically. Even though he's basically a giant human being, and that's just his normal height, which is insane to me. He's kind of, he plays it small. He's meek, he's shy, he's reserved. He's very uncomfortable in his own skin, and this guy clearly doesn't have many friends. And you know, if you just ran into him across the way, I'd be like, "Oh, hello, sir." You know, like, he doesn't seem like a bad guy at all. He just seems a little shy.
Yeah.
But
this guy always like takes a second to like tell you what theater your movie's in. Like rips the ticket. He's like, "You're in 8. It's over there." And it's also, what I love about his performance though is that it's clear he's never taken a public speaking class, because he's got his whole like creepy ass speech to Freddie Lounds in it, and it's like both very intimidating and very scary, but also it's like got the awkwardness of someone who's never stood up in front of a crowd. And it's like just it gives like all these layers to that performance.
I'm still just laughing. I mean, you're right, but I'm still just laughing about the ticket ripper comment.
Yeah, hey, we've all met a couple Francis Dollarhides out there.
Oh God, I hope not.
I'm just saying, it's gonna be the guy ripping the ticket.
Woo!
Those people, you gotta understand, the people that are weird at all the places you go to regularly, they have homes. And something's happening in those walls.
Okay.
So
Yeah, Tom Noonan's incredible in this too. And he essentially falls in love with a blind woman named Reba, which is important because this movie, along with like this incredible use of color, I brought up earlier how it's about like the use of mirrors and seeing specifically, which is why he'll often replace their eyes with pieces of glass, or not replace. He just puts them in, right?
I think he puts them in there, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Which is super gross, and they never spend a lot of time going over it because you know why? That would be gross and exploitative, and it's not about shock value.
Unless you're a really cool television series.
We're just gonna shit on like everything that's not Manhunter this episode, and I'm fine with it.
No, I honestly I like both interpretations. I'm not shitting on either one. He's a very different Dollarhide than the two other times we will end up seeing him. Specifically in his size. In the book, he's described as like a smaller guy, but he's done a lot of bodybuilding. So he's like a very muscular person, but he's not like this giant.
Yeah.
And this one, it's more of his imposing height that instead of his muscles. But we do get a lot of indication that he's also very physically strong.
Yeah, he just tosses Will Graham like a sack of potatoes.
Or he picks up Freddie Lounds by the face.
Oh, yeah.
And also, I couldn't get confirmation for this because I know that they kept Tom Noonan separated from like the rest of the cast. Like they never saw him until they had a scene with him to keep him mysterious. And I know that when William Peterson first faces him, that was the first time William Peterson had ever met Tom Noonan. So that adds a bit of a vibe to that scene. And I could not confirm if the look on Freddie Lounds' face when he opens his eyes and sees the Red Dragon Killer, I think that might be a genuine reaction.
Oh God.
Which that image with the fucking like pantyhose on his head. What the fuck is that on his? Is that what was that on his head?
I think that is a pantyhose.
I think it is, yeah. And it's just so scary.
It just his little pronunciations and like he has like a little finger gun.
Yeah.
He's like, well, here I.
Well, he's doing like a Jesus pose. Like Jesus would kind of do that in some paintings. I can't tell you like the actual term of what that is, but I've seen like Jesus or like kings, like supposedly like holy people doing. I think it might be like a blessing symbol.
Which makes sense because he believes he's ascending to like a higher state of being by going through these killings.
You are enhancing the afterbirth. That's so, and like you get like a sense of his grandiosity just in the visuals where he's got pictures of like the cosmos on his wall and the surface of Mars. And his dominating color is like a magenta and kind of earth colors, like tan earth colors, earth tones a little bit.
Yeah, definitely warmer.
Yeah, but they signal like death and like barrenness and emptiness. And that's what dominates a lot of Dollarhide's frames and his crime scenes.
After he and Reba spend the night together, he runs out to her on the docks by his house. And I guess because she can't see, she's feeling the sunrise. And so that whole thing is also like this bright orange tint, just because that's how the sun works.
Yes.
But also that's his dominating color, but it's less antagonistic there. Not just because he's had sex, but because it's almost like an out for him. Mm-hmm. Like being able to be seen by another human being for what he wants to be rather than what he is or becoming in his own mind.
Or what he thinks he is.
There you go.
I mean, he's projecting a lot in this movie.
You think so?
Both his insecurities and grandiosity. I mean, just his...
And literally.
Yes. And I mean, you get that moment, like, right after he slept with her where he, like, breaks down. And it's kind of like he kind of realized that... There's kind of that moment of doubt, like, maybe he doesn't need to be the killer he is to truly change. And then we learned that that's not true. You can't fix that, which is a pretty heartbreaking moment. Not for him. Like, it's sad. It's a little sad for him when he sees her with another man who is just helping her.
Yeah.
But in his mind, they're kissing. But that's just an indication that that relationship was never going to work.
Yeah.
He's something would have happened.
Too unwell.
Yeah, something would have happened to set it off. It just so happened it happened right then.
Set to an awesome 80s synth rock soundtrack.
Yeah. Another thing you will not see in most horror films.
Yes, and somehow it only accentuates the mood instead of takes you completely the fuck out of it.
Yeah, it's really it would almost be a joke if you tried that today.
Yeah. Like, I'm surprised, well, no, because this movie was never that popular, but, like, you could probably make a pretty good parody out of this. Like a Edgar Wright type comedy riff where it's, like, takes itself just seriously enough. Just because of, like, the 80s tropes, like the excessive use of, like, neon-esque colors and, like, the rock soundtracks.
All the suits.
And the suits, oh my god, the suits. And the hair. Freddie Lounge's hair. I've never seen Stephen Lang look so dorky.
It's incredible. Freddie Lounge looks the most 80s, I think.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Pal of mine. On news.
News, I'm doing my job.
He does, he pays the ultimate price.
Yep.
For being a reporter.
Take that, journalists.
Take that, journalists. I hope this doesn't slowly infect our minds, the collective consciousness to treat all reporters as enemies.
Ba-dum-bum.
We live in hell.
Yeah. Stephen Lang's also really good in this. He will pop up in Public Enemies eventually, also directed by Michael Mann, and Avatar, which everyone knows him from. Because he's so incredibly buff in that movie.
Everyone's favorite character.
Colonel Army.
Yeah. He's such a... it honestly is odd that that's the same actor.
It totally doesn't feel like him. Like, if I didn't know him from... Like, I had to look him up. I didn't know when I first saw him.
It's like he's just a good actor,
We're going to talk a lot of shit about the next time we run into this character. And I would completely agree with you anyways.
Going up against someone who I just who can make it a terrible movie tolerable for at least 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm. The next two Freddie Lounge are pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
Specifically the next one, though. And that'll be a little sad to talk about.
I'm honestly looking forward just to watching it again just for that.
Yeah.
Because literally nothing else in that film is better. The only other one is Jack Crawford, played by Dennis Farina.
I love Dennis Farina.
That's his name, right? I didn't pronounce it wrong, did I?
Yeah, no, Dennis Farina, yeah.
Yeah. He's great actor. Unfortunately passed recently. Like a year ago, I think.
I think 3 years ago. But
oh, really? I've lost all sense of time.
No, but he was... Dennis Farina was a tremendous actor. I don't think he was ever, like, as popular as he could have been, but he was always in something. Like, he was never not in a movie that you were going to watch one year or another, Or, like, a TV series or something.
He had great... He's got a great catalog of performances.
Yeah.
I mean, he's probably the reason why I like the movie Get Shorty.
I don't know if you've ever seen New Girl.
Oh, was he on New Girl?
Yeah, he had a minor arc where he played Nick Miller's father.
Oh, really?
Yeah. New Girl's a wonderful little show that I don't think ever got the credit it deserved either. And it's ending this year, so I'm a little sad about that.
I've heard it's good, but I've got like 7 other shows to get through.
Totally understandable. And they wrote him off of the show they wrote off the character that he died as well. And then he ended up dying in real life. And so that's a really sad episode, but then it gets sadder with real life context. And it's very unfortunate. Yeah.
It's like Peter Falk and Columbo.
How do you think Columbo would do in this movie?
Oh, Columbo would have caught Dollarhide within an hour. No, I don't know. because every Columbo episode is based on the premise that Columbo meets this killer within the first 5 minutes of arriving at the crime scene. So, but I don't know. I would love to have seen him team up with Will Graham. Well, I basically talked about, the three basic lights, which are like blue, green, and magenta, kind of. Magenta being Dollarhide, blue being Graham, and green being the connector. And I like the way green is used in this film. It kind of becomes a game watching it pop up every now and then. And it's also interesting to see these colors mixed together and which ones are more dominant in each scene. With green representing, kind of discovery and the investigation itself. When you're at the FBI headquarters and ever you see the color green, it's like a very controlled and trapped green. Meanwhile, when you're at Dollarhide's house, the green is coming through the windows. Also, the windows are slanted and the walls are very angular, so it gives you this off-kilter shadow effect. To show that that this Dollarhide guy's a little off. I mean, that's kind of basic stuff, but I still find it really interesting. I also find it that both that the way the forensic science is shown to us in this film, because the books and later versions of the series play up the kind of supporting cast that help out the lead detective a lot. In this film, there really aren't that many side characters. We kind of meet them one at a time, and maybe for one or two scenes. But the FBI all the forensic science is shown to us through how they manipulate light. I think that's interesting that they're literally manipulating light, which is also how films are made. Mm-hmm. Films are about manipulating light. And Dollarhide works, in a photo development plant. So he's manipulating light in his own way. I just like that connection right there.
There's a really interesting article. I gotta find it. I think it's Vox or someone put it up for the 30th anniversary of Manhunter a year ago or something like that. Where the thesis was basically Manhunter's about looking for a serial killer, but it's also about Michael Mann's ode to film in a weird way because of that manipulation of light and how it's all about seeing, and then the key to the case is the films themselves.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was an interesting read. So I'll put a link or I'll put images up if I don't know. It depends how lazy I am.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I get that. I get that feeling. I also like a lot of the sound design in the film, not just the music. To go back to the first hotel room scene when Graham is looking over the crime, when he's watching the tape of the crime scene, he can't quite get this. He can't quite put things together yet because he's just starting out again. I like how he has his balcony open so you can hear the ocean. That's kind of his, lifeline, is tethered to the ground as he's entering this dark world again. And I he's forced to call home just to talk to his wife, and he basically just wants to hear her voice because he knows what he's about to do. Mm-hmm. And you just get that juxtaposition of the blue tinted, house and his, very tan, very earth tone hotel room.
I've always loved the scene in the plane where he drifts off to sleep. Not just because it's it's sad, but also kind of darkly funny. Mm-hmm. He's looking over these crime scene photos, and it's not funny to anyone in the movie, but it's just oh fuck, that's fucked up.
Yeah.
He drifts off. The scene itself is also very good, where he's drifting off in this dream, and his wife is also now covered in white clothing. You can't really make her out initially. She's out of focus. It's the plant life behind her that's in focus. And so you can't really get a grasp on her until there's a close-up on her face later. And there's someone else on the boat too, but you can't see their face either. Then he snaps out of it, and there's these crime scene photos just laid out next to this little girl that's right next to him. And she starts crying, and it's oh, fuck.
And also in that scene, you get the green. In that dream, you get the green is now kind of dominating, his more home life. That's kind of his fear that he might bring this back with him.
Initially, there's this cool magenta purple light coming through the windows, and then when he wakes up from the dream, there's just nothing. But we cut to the outside of the plane, and it's that magic hour where there's blue, that dark, rich royal blue, and then the sunset just over the horizon, and then just that little glimmer of orange light, and then we kind of fade away to the blue, and then that's it. And then he's back in a white, sterile house, surrounded by more wildlife and earth tones.
Mm-hmm.
That's called a transition, kids.
It's called a transition, Trevorrow.
So when all the roads come to a head, and Graham figures out who, not directly who the killer is, but how to track him down.
Which is a great fucking moment in this movie.
It's another incredible moment in this movie.
It's as exciting, if not more so, than the actual shootout that follows.
Yeah, the shootout, I didn't like it when I first saw it because it's so different. It's
such a stylized gunfight, which we're not used to at all. It almost looks like a mistake, but it's really just an attempt to tap that sort of chaos, you know?
Yeah, because I mean, there are a lot of fucking shitty movies with shitty editing nowadays. Like it reminds me of when I saw the last Die Hard movie, and it is just impossible to follow through what's happening there. Like I could see how someone could make this mistake, where if someone watches that movie and then they watch Manhunter, they're like, well, the endings are the same. It's like they're not, because the editing here is still like, it's guided by purpose, and there's a geographical clarity that is non-existent. I mean, not just in Die Hard, but like in a lot of other movies that have shootouts. You know, like you spent enough time in Dollarhide's house by that point, and you're aware of like the exterior forest around his house, so you can kind of trace where everyone's going and running around. But the editing between Graham and Dollarhide specifically is really good. As Graham runs through,
that run up and jump through the window is like so my shit. It's like, that's why I watch movies.
It's, if I was transported for like the rest of the movie, like I've ascended by that point.
Mm-hmm.
But when he's running through, and then on one perspective, it's like really fast paced and like, oh my god, he's gonna break through the glass. And then as Graham breaks through the glass, it like starts, it perfectly melds the two, where it's like slow and then fast, and then it just hits you immediately again with the fast cut, hyperkinetic editing shit. And then from that point on, it's just like, oh, cut. And it threw me the fuck off when I first saw it.
I get it. It's also a little weird. I mean, I kind of get, there is something to say about that all this buildup leads to basically a shootout with a monster.
Yeah.
But there's a lot going on visually here. They're trying to tell the story more visually. Because in the book, the book doesn't end this way, and the later adaptation, Dollarhide fakes his death in an explosion and then goes for Will Graham's family. In both the book and the remake, which leaves Will Graham horribly scarred in the end. He's like I think in either Silence of the Lambs or Hannibal the book, they describe him as like being kind of like, he just stays at home. He's so disfigured.
In the books, he gets stabbed in the face, right?
Yeah. I think he gets like stabbed like through the face.
Fuck.
And there's more of an emotional confrontation there, but that confrontation is still happening. It's just mixed with this gunfight. There's also a deleted scene, which I only like literally just discovered. There's also, I never knew there was a Manhunter director's cut, which I've never seen. And I only came across it because I was listening to a commentary, and it was for the director's cut, so it didn't match my version perfectly. But there's a scene where Will goes to meet the family that would have been the next target had Dollarhide not been stopped. And that's kind of Graham, kind of, you know, him going to the family instead of Dollarhide. He made it there, but he's not going to kill him, you know?
Yeah. And, like, I get why they cut that scene, too. Because you essentially get the same thing with Reba, because after Dollarhide sees Reba, what he thinks is her kissing another man, he's going to kill her and then realizes he can't do it. And then it doesn't matter because he's caught anyways, and then he gets gunned down by Will Graham after he's killed several other police officers with a shotgun holding it in one hand, which is just like, holy fuck, dude. What the fuck?
And in his death, he achieves his transformation.
Yep. You get that classic
Also,
red dragon symbol there.
Yeah. Also, I should note there's got to be a deleted scene out there, which I also didn't find, where they show the red dragon tattoo. Because there's photos out there of Tom Noonan with the red dragon tattoo on his body, but that never appears in the at least the regular version of the film.
Yeah, I haven't seen the director's cut either, but I have to imagine there's something floating out there.
I know there's just all I've seen is pictures, and I know that there was a scene with Freddie Lounds right before he got set on fire. That I think maybe Freddie begging for his life or something. Which I can understand why you cut that. That might have been a little much.
Yeah. I mean, which is even funny to say, like, for a movie that's about a serial killer and, like, that takes you to these dark-ass places, it knows when to hold back because in its own way, I think Mann's being respectable, even though it's fiction, like, of the seriously grotesque shit that's happening here.
Yeah.
Because he's so interested in talking about, like, the trauma and, like, the toll that this could take on people.
You can tell when someone actually really cares about the violence in their film or when they're just trying to be an edgelord.
Yeah.
Also, I'd be a little disappointed in myself if I didn't mention that in the book Red Dragon, Francis Dollarhide eats the Red Dragon painting.
That is correct.
So he consumes it.
In all the other versions, he consumes it, right?
Does he? I don't remember I barely remember Red Dragon.
I remember... that might just be my leftover memory from Hannibal, but I'm pretty sure he eats it there, too.
I know Hannibal does it just because it's fucking Hannibal. Like, they would not pass up that opportunity.
Yeah, like, that's the least weird thing to happen on that show. Okay, but really quick also, the last moment between Will Graham and Reba after he's saved her, and then he escorts her out to the ambulance, and then she asks him who he is, and he says, my name's Graham, I'm Will Graham. And I think that's why it's okay to have cut that other scene where he meets the family, because by that point, we've already established that he is completely Will Graham now, you do that work. Yeah, he's succeeded. And he can leave that world behind once and for all. Until he gets rebooted.
Yep.
Yay.
Isn't it odd that this is a film also about it's kind of Michael Mann exploring the idea of filmmaking, but it's also a pretty good advertisement for film being terrible? Because a serial killer might intercept it and use it to break into your house.
That's why everyone should own their own video. I got nothing, but yeah.
That's why everyone should have their guns attached to their home video cameras.
Didn't they do that in Zero Dark 30? Or am I misremembering that movie now?
I think they did have cameras on, at least their helmets.
Oh, yeah.
I just remember, like, every shot in that movie was just pop, pop, and then dead. It's Yay America.
Is that what that movie's about? Because I feel like not.
It really isn't, but people who aren't that skeptical of America will see it that way. Because that's it's hard to change those people's minds.
Yeah. Anything else?
I should also mention
Manhunter.
What'd you say?
Anything else you want to bring up about Manhunter?
Yeah, we never really talked why the title of the movie's Manhunter.
Oh yeah, because he's a man hunting.
Well, the book was called Red Dragon, right? Mm-hmm. The Red Dragon painting plays a key part in the film. Dino De Laurentiis produced a film the year previous called Year of the Dragon, which underperformed. So Dino De Laurentiis was convinced that it was because the word dragon was in the title.
Wow.
So they changed it to Manhunter.
And that worked out well for them.
William, you're going to make yourself sick or get yourself killed.
Multiple trails.
Just you and me now, sport.
One hunter.
I'm gonna find you, damn it.
FBI agent Will Graham. Manhunter.
Matt, would you recommend Manhunter to people?
Matt Hunter?
Yeah, Manhunter.
Yes. I would. I would also recommend Manhunter.
As would I. 2 thumbs up, said Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel.
Who are dead.
Yeah, I don't even know if they gave it a thumbs up, actually. So
I don't know if they even saw it.
They didn't like Blade Runner at first, so...
You know what, that might have come out in their phase where they were all like, the violence of cinema today is awful.
We all
People
go
just
through
wanna-
phases. I think that's
Yeah.
also important to talk about with stuff like this, too. Like, there was a point where I enjoyed a movie we'll talk about later in this retrospective, and then I revisited it after I had seen a lot more movies, and my taste had drastically changed. And then I realized I hated it. So...
There's also a masterpiece of a film, which we'll be talking about, which has an element of it that is aged horribly.
I can't imagine what you're talking about.
Well, we'll get to it.
Yeah, next up, Silence of the Lambs. That'll be up probably the week after this one, once these start going up, so keep a lookout for that. And on that note, Matt, where can the people find you?
I am at EmperorOCN at twitter.com.
You can find me and all Waffle Press related retrospective things here in the descriptions down below, on the YouTubes, on Twitters, and at DEWGO Waffles. Links to all my other bylines over there. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We have been professionally unprofessional.